Hey everyone, today we are going to be talking about using absolute value to find distance between points on the coordinate plane. We're going to talk about when points are in the same quadrant, so they are on the same side of either the x or y axis, and then we're going to talk about when they are in different coordinates or opposite sides of one of the axes. We're going to talk about horizontal distance as well, and then vertical distance. So the first example, we are going to talk about horizontal distance in the same quadrant. So when the points are from left to right, and we're trying to find the distance between them, and they are on the same side of the x or y axis. So it says when two points are in the same quadrant and they have the same y coordinate. So if I'm in the same quadrant and I have the same y coordinate, we're going to subtract the absolute values of the x coordinates to find the distance because the y coordinates are going to be the same. And there is clearly distance between them. So one thing I'm going to show here is on the graph, I can count the spaces in between. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces in between. So that's going to be the distance between the points. What this over here is showing, part A, it says that the points have the same y coordinate. So let's find the absolute values of the x's. So the absolute value of -1 is 1, and the absolute value of -5 is +5. And then I can subtract these two things. So 5 minus 1 gives me that same distance 4. So if I was not given the picture, I could still find the distance between those 2 points by understanding that they are both on the same side of one of the axes in the same quadrant, and that they are horizontal from each other. So same y coordinate, I can subtract the x values. So here we've got a similar situation. So it's, this is 1/2, comma, -1.5. And then this is 2, comma, -1.5. So again, my y coordinates are the same. So u is 1/2, comma, -1.5. And v is 2, comma, -1.5. And I can see here that my y coordinates are the same. That means that I can find the absolute value of the x values, so 1/2 and 2, and I can subtract them. So 2 minus 1/2 is going to be 1.5. So the distance here is going to be 1.5. I can also count the spaces in between the points on the graph. So because I have a visual, I can use that visual. So if each line is 0.5, so this would be 0.5, 1, 1.5. So this would be 1.5. Over here, we've got P and Q. P is at -5, comma, -2. And Q is at -2, comma, -2. We still have the same y coordinate. So they're on the same side of the y-axis in the same quadrant because they're both negative. And then they both have the same y coordinate. So I can find the absolute value of -5 and the absolute value of -2. And I can do 5 minus 2 and get a distance of 3 between them. Okay, this is horizontal distance in the same quadrant. And again, if you're given a picture, you can count the spaces in between. So here would be 3 units. But this absolute value, okay, all of this stuff down right here is what happens when you're not given a picture. So now we're going to look at points that are in different quadrants. So when one is on one side of the x or y axis and one is on the other. So this says when 2 points are in different quadrants and they have the same y coordinate, we're going to add the absolute values of the x coordinates. So I can see that -4, comma, 2 is over here on the left side of the graph, and I can see that 1, comma, 2 is on the right-hand side of the graph. Again, I can count the spaces in between them just to show that they are the same. So here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I do the absolute values and I add them together, my distance should be 5. They have the same y coordinates. So if I look here, I can see that this one has a y coordinate of 2 and this one also has a y coordinate of 2. If they have the same y coordinates, I can find the absolute value of x. So the absolute value of -4 is +4. The absolute value of 1 is 1. And then it tells me to add them together. So the distance between the points is 5 units, which is exactly what I counted on the graph. So in B and C, we're going to do the same thing. Again, I can show that I can count the units and that what I get from counting should be the same thing with absolute value. Down here, we are looking at a scale of 0.5 on the graph. So every time I jump a box, it's actually 0.5. So this is 0.5. No, it's 0.25. I'm sorry, it's 0.25. So this is 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1. So this is one whole unit apart from each other. So the ordered pairs here look like -0.75, comma, -0.25, and then it looks like I got 0.25, comma, -0.25. Again, the scale of the graph is by 0.25. So so my y coordinates are the same. So here we go, y coordinates are the same. So I'm going to find the absolute value. So the absolute value of -0.75 is +0.75. And the absolute value of 0.25 is the same, 0.25. So I'm going to add those together. 0.75 plus 0.25 is 1. So the distance between the points is 1 unit. And again, counting them on the graph and doing the absolute value should give you the same result. In part C, we're back to going by ones. So I can count to the distance between K and L. So 1, 2, 3. So my answer should be 3 units when I'm finished. K is -2, 1. And L is 1, 1. My y coordinates are the same. So I'm going to do the absolute value of 2 and the absolute value of 1. And 2 plus 1 is 3. Okay, so this is horizontal distance on the graph. So the graph, the points are left to right on the graph. And then we did the same quadrant and we did different quadrants. So now as we flip onto the back, we're going to be doing vertical distance. So I've got one more graph for you, and then we're going to look at some vertical distance that is not on the graph. So practicing using our skills from the front side and doing it on the back side with no graph. So this says 2 points are in the same quadrant and they have the same x coordinate. So here it's a little bit different. I'm going to change my highlighter color to make it look different. Here we're going to have the same x coordinate. We're going to do the same thing. So if I'm in the same quadrant, but I have the same x coordinate, I can still subtract the absolute values of the y coordinates. So it's going to be the opposite. So this says, consider the points on the graph. They have the same x coordinate. So if I go over to my graph, 3 and 3 are the same. If they have the same x coordinate, I can take the absolute value and subtract the y's. So the absolute value of -1 is +1. The absolute value of -5 is +5. So I'm going to do 5 minus 1, and I get 4 units. If I come over to my graph, I can count the exact same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4 units. Okay, so whatever I get on the graph should be the same as what I get when I do the absolute values. So now we're going to look at some examples that don't use the graph. So it says find the vertical distance between -1, -1/2 and -1, -2. My x coordinates are the same. So I'm going to take the absolute value of the y coordinates and I'm going to subtract them. So the absolute value of -1/2 is +1/2. The absolute value of -2 is +2. And I'm going to do 2 minus 1/2. And I get 1 1/2, and I'm going to add units. In part C, again, my x coordinates are the same. So I'm going to take the absolute value of my y coordinates. And I get 2/3 and 1 1/3, and I'm going to subtract. So 1 1/3 minus 2/3. For this one, the denominators are already the same, but I can't do 1 minus 2, so I'm going to change the mixed number to an improper fraction. 1 times 3 is 3, plus 1 is 4 over 3, minus 2/3 leaves me with 2/3 units. Okay, so for both horizontal and vertical distance, when the points are in the same quadrant, we're going to subtract. If the points are in different quadrants, we are going to add. So in our next example, it says when 2 points are in different quadrants and they have the same x coordinate, so again, here we're looking at the x coordinates, we're going to add the absolute values of the y coordinates to find the distance between the 2 points. So I've got 2, 1 and 2, -4. My x coordinates are the same. So I'm going to find the absolute values of the y's. So the absolute value of -4 is +4. The absolute value of 1 is 1. And this time I'm going to add 4 plus 1 is 5 units. And if I come over to my graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. This is just like a horizontal distance in 2 different quadrants. So one was above and one was below. In this case, one was to the left and one was to the right of the y-axis for horizontal distance. But when they are separated by a quadrant or they are separated by an axis, you're going to count through that axis and add those points together. So my last examples here are practicing now this time with vertical distance. And again, we're looking for the x coordinate to be the same. So in both of these examples, the x coordinate is the same. So I'm going to take the absolute value of the y coordinates. So the absolute value of 0.5 is 0.5. The absolute value of -0.5 is 0.5. And because they were opposite signs, I'm going to add them together and I get 1 unit. Okay, so this one had a negative sign and the other one didn't. They are opposite signs, so they are on opposite sides of an axis. They are not in the same quadrant. I'm going to add them together. For part C, I've got to have the absolute value of 1.5, and I've got to have the absolute value of -2. What went into these things had opposite signs, so I'm going to add what comes out. And I've got 3.5 units. Okay, this is finding horizontal and vertical distance on the coordinate plane. We can find horizontal and vertical distance using a coordinate plane. So when we're given the graph, we can count the spaces. But we can also do the action, count the distance or find the distance not on the coordinate plane by using absolute value. So on the front side, we stuck strictly to the graphs. I showed you how to count the boxes and how that connects to using absolute value. And then on the back side, we did some practice of both. So I showed you how it worked on the graph, and then we applied it to something that was not on the graph. You have a worksheet for homework tonight practicing this skill. So there's some that are going to be on the graph and some that are not. Please come with questions tomorrow. Good luck.